Chapter 1, Introduction to Data. In this chapter, we're going to start by looking at data and data types. Before we do that, we're going to talk about what the population and the sample are, and then what categorical variables versus numerical variables are. And then in the last half of the chapter, we'll talk about how we classify, collect, organize, and store data. Well, first of all, this is a statistics class, but what is statistics? Well, it's the science of collecting, organizing, summarizing, and analyzing data to answer questions and or draw conclusions. Who uses statistics? Well, statistics is all over the place. Statistics are used in the scanners when the grocery store scans the items that you purchase. They use statistics in baseball to determine things like RBI rates for baseball players. The Census Bureau is full of statistics that they collect on people that live in the United States. And most recently with the COVID-19 pandemic, you've seen lots of statistics collected by health organizations, including things like infection rates, death rates, vaccination rates, and so on. Statistician David Moore says data are numbers in context. So when you see data, it's important to think about the context of that data. Where did those numbers come from? What do those numbers represent? So for example, here's some data. What could this data represent? So I've got numbers that range here from 9.31 up to 10. Without any units here or any other information, this data could represent all sorts of things, right? They could be, I don't know, lengths of long pretzels, or they could be pounds of butter, or I don't know, right? You need some more information. Well, here, this was the 10 heaviest babies born in North Carolina in 2004. When we look at statistics, we could talk about descriptive statistics, and that means that we're going to organize and summarize the data. So we take the data that we've collected and we describe the data using numerical summaries, tables, and graphs. So things like we find the average, or we'll talk about things like the median or the standard deviation. In inferential statistics, we use collected data to make estimates and conclusions about the population from which the data was obtained. So the idea here is that perhaps we want to say something about all babies born in North Carolina, but we're only able to collect information from a handful of hospitals in North Carolina. Maybe I can take that information and infer something about all babies in North Carolina. So in statistics, we're going to collect data to describe a population. So imagine that this whole circle is my population. It's often hard to collect data from the entire population, so we use a subset of the population called a sample. Those are the smiley faces in orange. Our goal is to make that sample as representative of the population as possible. To be unbiased, each member of the population should have an equal chance of being selected for my sample. So let's look at some examples. I want to identify the population and sample in the examples below. So this first example, researchers wanted to determine the operative temperature of common frogs. They caught 50 common frogs of different body sizes in the Tuchola Forest region, Poland, and sorted the frogs by size. They then measured the body temperature, ambient temperature, and determined the body temperature of the frog in thermal equilibrium with its environment. So if I want to know what the population here is, that's the objects that I want to be able to describe, right? The overall objects that I'm interested in. Here, researchers wanted to determine operative temperature of common frogs. So my population is common frogs. Now the sample is the set of objects or individuals from which we actually collect data. In this case, they caught 50 common frogs in the Chukola forests. So my sample is the 50 common frogs that were caught. Let's look at another example. A newspaper wanted to investigate voter support for Medicaid expansion. A 2015 poll of 603 adults from April 8th through the 19th found that 64% of Idahoans disagree with the legislature's inaction of Medicaid expansion. Okay, so again, for the population, we want to think about who were the researchers hoping to describe. Well, they're interested in voter support, and in particular, they're in Idaho, right? So my population here, is Idaho voters. Now my sample is the group from which the data was actually collected. That's the 603 adults. So the sample was the 603 adults that were polled.